Another WWE documentary in the works, details on AEW's huge TV deal, but some nasty injuries at the Dynamite tapings and more. I'm Luke Owen and this is the WrestleTalk News.
Support WrestleTalk!
Give us a subscribe.
We're just 1 week removed from Netflix releasing their longer-awaited Vince McMahon documentary series, which detailed his rise through the wrestling ranks and his sharp downfall following allegations of sexual assault and sex trafficking. I've now caught up with the first 5 episodes, so here's my quick review. Yeah, it's alright. I like the archive footage. Someone who wasn't in the doc was Jonathan Coachman, and he revealed on his podcast that he was approached to be in it, but turned it down. However, he also revealed that another production company on a major network contacted him recently because they are also making a documentary about WWE. Speaking of old-time wrestling names with podcasts, and there are going to be quite a few licking their wounds today, as AEW and WBD officially proved them wrong when they announced their new TV deal. The deal was first confirmed by Variety, but contained a lot of information that had been previously reported by the likes of Andrew Zarian, Sean Ross Sapp, Dave Meltzer, WrestleNomics, and WrestleVotes. Variety report that the deal for 3 years with a 4th-year option is worth $150 million per year, but there will be other revenue opportunities, most notably pay-per-views. AEW pay-per-views will remain on all their current providers, but will also be available on WBD streaming platform Max at a discounted price. Dave Meltzer writes most of the marketing of pay-per-views will be geared towards Max, and Max will be promoting the events. Speaking of Max, and starting in January 2025, Dynamite and Collision will air on TBS and TNT, and stream on Max at the same time. This means the West Coast feed will be at the same time as the East Coast feed on Max, but the time versions will air in their usual slots. As had been previously reported, Rampage is not part of this deal. Sean Ross Sapp writes on Fightful Select, Rampage was a show that WBD had requested in 2021, but upon the new deal, both sides prioritized Dynamite and Collision. WBD have told SRS that AEW could take Rampage elsewhere if they wanted to. As it stands, Dynamite, Collision, and Rampage libraries will be added to Max, but should AEW take Rampage to another network, then the library will be removed. Rampage could be the show AEW take to Fox, which had also been rumored to be a new show titled Shockwave. Swerve Strickland said recently that AEW was going to Fox, and Sean Ross Sapp reported via Fightful Select there was definitely people in AEW that wish that didn't get out. It turns out that Swerve didn't know he was being filmed at the time for a vlog. Dave Meltzer has said of the Fox deal that AEW are looking to get a show on either Tuesday or Thursday so as to not go head-to-head with Raw or SmackDown. While Variety report the deal is worth $150 million per year, Sports Business Journal report it's actually $170 million a year. WrestleVotes reported via Twitter they've heard it's closer to $185 million, which Andrew Zarian notes is the figure he's also heard. Meltzer writes the new deal will make the company very profitable going forward, even if no deal is made for a 3rd weekly show. Interestingly, Sports Business Journal also note in their report that this new deal means that WBD have an equity stake in AEW, i.e., they now own a portion of the business. However, according to Sean Ross Sapp, nobody from either side in an official capacity had any idea where that came from, and claimed that they had never heard of that element of the deal. One final note is that WBD now doesn't have exclusivity over AEW programming, hence why they can shop a 3rd show to Fox. This means we could see a return of the YouTube show AEW Dark, with Sean Ross Sapp noting on Twitter they've wanted to bring that back for a while. Myself and Ollie Davis will break down all of this in a special episode of the WrestleTalk podcast, as well as looking at AEW's TV ratings trend, which you can watch over at patreon.com/WrestleTalk. Quickly before the AEW Dynamite review, and it's being reported by PW Insider that Sammy Guevara was injured during the ROH tapings last night and had to be stretchered from the ring. Dave Meltzer noted on Twitter that it's believed to be a concussion. PW Insider also report that local talent Kelly Madden was knocked unconscious during her Ring of Honor match with Lady Frost, and she also had to be stretchered out. But now it's time for my review of the 5th anniversary of AEW Dynamite, aka the I can't believe it's been 5 years either edition of AEW Dynamite, in about 5 minutes. The show opened with a very cool promo from the Blackpool Combat Club, with Jon Moxley telling Bryan Danielson that he is going to bury him in his own backyard at WrestleDream, and finally Daddy can be sent home for good. So, are you burying him or giving him a lovely send-off? Mixed messages there, John. The action kicked off with the hotly anticipated rematch of Will Ospreay versus Ricochet. This would be their 9th singles encounter, and currently Will is up 5-4, but crucially, these are not the same men that went viral and angered Vader on Twitter 8 years ago. Will is a very different wrestler and has adapted his style, while Ricochet is also a different wrestler but still believes he can be that high flyer he was all those years ago. It led to an interesting match dynamic. They did the homage to the superhero pose spot early, but the match became about how quickly Ricochet could counter Ospreay's moves, like countering the hidden blade into a backslide bomb and spinning piledriver for a very cool near fall. It meant that Ospreay had to try and speed himself up, and after several counters and reversals, Ospreay hit the hidden blade and collapsed into the pin, but both men's shoulders were down and the match was declared a draw. Boo. But don't worry everyone, babyface Tony Khan announced that the match will continue. Hooray! And it did! Until Konosuke Takeshita ran in for the DQ. Boo! Right, so this isn't ideal. I get why they did it, and it did get the right kind of heat from this crowd, chanting "a-hole" at Takeshita rather than booing the company for a lame finish, but it got the wrong kind of heat with me. You know me by now, I hate DQ finishes, and the reason I hate DQ finishes is how often they're used. When you use them a lot, they don't feel like a creative way to get to a three-way, which was announced for WrestleDream. It feels like a booking crutch to not be either guy. Comparing it to Raw, Seth Rollins' interference in Reed vs. Strowman would have been more impactful to me if every other match, bar one on that show, didn't also have distraction and interference. If this had only been AEW's second DQ of the year, this could and probably would have worked better. However, also like the finish to Strowman and Reed, I think this is just a me thing. That finish got over with that crowd, and this finish got over with this crowd. I just think this finish is a bit lame. Mercedes Moné cut a promo about being a big part of Dynamite and was handed a business card by MVP. And Chris Jericho came out for a promo to set up an ROH Championship match with Mark Briscoe. He said the Ocho was dead and he'll now become the 9 in Spanish. I'm sorry, I don't know. We didn't do Spanish at my school and I'm doing German on Duolingo. Mark came out to accept his challenge and Jericho said that he doesn't think that Mark can beat him, but he thinks his brother Jay could have. I'm not a fan of this. If you're going to bring up Jay and use him for heat, I'd rather do it in a bigger feud than this. I just don't feel like this feud has earned it. Darby cut a promo laying out an open challenge for WrestleDream, and Hangman Page killed the Ass Boys before going to try and kill Juice Robinson. They had a great match which saw some good crowd brawling and Juice throwing beer and popcorn that he took from fans. That probably cost upwards of $20. We're at a cost of living crisis, man! And Page won when he low-blowed Juice out of sight of Aubrey Edwards and hit the buckshot. He tried to strangle Juice afterwards, but Jay White made his return and ran down for the save. A cool return and hopefully some good direction for Mr. Switchblade. Katsuyori Shibata and Jack Perry made a TNT title match for WrestleDream, and Britt Baker beat Serena Deeb in her hometown. It felt like the fact that Baker was from the town was more over than she was, but the match itself was very good. Baker won with the lockjaw. Deeb attacked her after the match, but Queen Armanada made the save. Mariah May was watching from ringside, setting up more title contenders for her championship, and scuffled with Willow Nightingale backstage. Yep, even on a 2.5-hour broadcast. Only room for one women's match. Pitiful. It was announced earlier in the broadcast that Taz had taken a trip to NXT. That's the only reason I can find why he was attacked in a parking lot. Hook said that he will find out who did it, and it could be Christian, who said that soon he will have it all hook, line, and sinker. Private Party quickly beat the Iron Savages and set themselves up as the next tag title contenders against the Young Bucks. A nice callback to the early days of Dynamite for sure, and a nice follow-on from BCC reminding Private Party that they've done, well, nothing since beating the Young Bucks on the second episode of Dynamite, but I'm not sure the best way to build up a tag title contender is, checks notes, having them get beaten up by a heel faction and then losing to said heel faction. The Bucks came out to accept the tag title match for tonight, but then remembered they're on limited dates and can't do it. Jack Perry attacked Private Party and Shibata ran down for the save, and Christopher Daniels announced there will be a trios match on Rampage. MVP was set to make a big announcement backstage, but was interrupted by Prince Nana, who reminded MVP that he used to be a wrestler. MVP wasn't here to hear that, so take it up with his new complaints department, the debuting Shelton Benjamin. Fightful Select report that Benjamin's deal has been in place for a number of weeks now, as has the deal for Bobby Lashley. SRS writes his debut is imminent. And the main event, with over 40 minutes of the show left, was Bryan Danielson versus Kazuchika Okada in a Bad Faith Takers on Twitter Get Engagement stipulation match. The gimmick was it was for both the AEW World Championship and the Continental Championship, but because of the C2 stips, the Continental Championship belt was only on the line for the first 20 minutes. it. It's a clever 70s level old school technique of having both titles on the line but still having a finish where neither man loses the belt. But this is 2024, so it's easier just to pretend to be mad about it on Twitter and claim it's too complicated to understand. For me, it made a very fun story in the match, as the first 20 minutes wasn't Okada rushing to get a win. He didn't need to beat Danielson. Danielson had to beat him. Okada just had to run out the clock. It meant that Danielson had more urgency early doors and got frustrated as Okada would roll to the outside off his big spot. He had him in the label lock with 1 minute to go, but Okada got to the ropes and rolled to the outside once again as Danielson hit the Psycho knee as the time limit expired. So now Danielson had to win even more. The second half of the match was just as great as the first and really kicked into another gear when Okada hit the Psycho knee of his own for a near fall and Danielson responded with his own Rainmaker. But as Okada was on top, Claudio Castagnoli and Pac appeared at ringside, and taking his eye off the ball for just a moment cost him as Danielson got a backslide for the win. Okada, annoyed at the BCC furthering his feud with Claudio, which will likely play into the C2, left, and the heels held up Danielson for Mox to cut a promo on him, again alluding to someone else pulling the strings. Wheeler Yuta ran down for the save and teased hitting his own teammates with a hammer and challenged Claudio and Pac to a tag match on next week's Title Tuesday, which, as far as I can tell, currently has 0 title matches announced for it. It capped off a rather confusing episode of Dynamite that summed up their previous 5 years. Flashes of brilliance and great wrestling overshadowed by confounding overbooking. Now go and watch our most recent episode of Worst Match Ever, where Sullivan, Tempest and I watch arguably one of the best matches I've ever seen, The Invisible Man versus Invisible Stan.